All right, Counselor Trimble, you are on.
Alrighty, all right. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Government Operations Committee, October 17th. It is 5:33. And at the table for council, Councilor Hawes, Council Pelletier, Council Fournier, Council Craig, Council Trimble, and Council Leonard. And while this might be, I think, our last meeting of the council year, I still don't know who's on the committee. So Courtney can probably tell me who's on. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I know who's on the committee, everybody but the chair of the council chair, not this chair. All right, the first item is a resolve authorizing city manager to accept $5,968,828 in grant funds from Maine DHS for the Women, Infant, and Children's Program.
Yes, I believe Public Health Director Patty Hamilton is going to join us for the first two items.
Oh, that's okay. I'll get it after. Patty Hamilton, Public Health. Yes, this is our WIC grant that we've had for 20 some odd years, I want to say. This is funding for both the food and the staff. So it is funding for the formula that we hand out, the vouchers for food, as well as the staff and the budget for the program itself.
How do those vouchers, they have specific stores they can spend the vouchers at, and then the store send it back to the city and they get paid? Is that how the?
It is now all electronic.
Oh, it is, okay,
Yes.
because it used to be kind of a complicated system.
It was very used to have the checks and go up
Yeah.
to the register. And it was during COVID that we actually did the switch over to the
Okay.
EBT cards. So now they can just
So
go
can
up
they use it any place they take EBT, or is it still
Yeah.
limited where they can use it?
any
Any
place
place
with,
takes EBT?
I believe so.
Okay. So, any questions on this item? Is there a motion to approve this?
Or
Move
move staff. Go ahead. Move staff recommendation.
Second, a question.
Council Sprague.
Just a real quick comment on the, our checklist for things that might be on the government operations agenda for the future is to continue to work with the public health department and have periodic updates on the planning process that's is taking place. And I think most people may know, but maybe not all, that the public health department's in the midst of a planning process, seeking accreditation. It's including putting together a lot of data on the community and a community health improvement plan and a updated strategic plan for the department. And so when we look at these things, ultimately, we will be looking at them in the context of an updated plan. So, but it's really extremely positive that the department continues to get these grants, and it's a really excellent performance from the department. So I think everybody's to be commended there. But we ought to keep in mind that this is really part of a big picture of what our public health department does, not only locally but regionally. And within the next 6 months or so, there'll be more information about that.
It is
Fair
under.
enough.
Yes, that's great summary.
Hey, thank you. Without objection, this item has passage, and the next item is another resolve for money from the Maine CDC for public health infrastructure.
So this is some of the money that the federal government got and passed through to us, to the localities, to help enhance public health workforce primarily, and the infrastructure to support the workforce. So it covers funding for the staff to go to national conferences, to help hire somebody to help run the program, so administrative people to do that sort of thing, and general support for all of our health promotion programs, which is, as you know, is the tobacco, the food and nutrition, the physical activity, that side of the work that we do.
Okay, any questions or a motion to approve this?
Or moved. Second.
Move it second, without any objection, this item has passage. Thank you, Ted. Next item is a climate action plan update. Courtney?
Yes. So as everyone knows, we've been participating in a regional climate action planning process. I'm going to welcome to the table Maddie Jensen with Bax. I assume Maddie. Yeah. Okay. And she actually put together a little update for everyone. I'm going to screen share that.
I brought pens, so I'll pass them out. We got a lot of them, and so I want to make sure that we don't use them for the end of the project. I brought extra for those in the audience as well. I would say they're kind of, I think they're good pens. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. You can,
Perfect. Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
Presenting.
Yep,
Okay.
you're sharing.
So yeah, my name's Maddie Jensen. I'm a planner with Bax and I'm on the project management team for this process. We figured now would be a good time to update you all with elections around the corner, making sure that you all are updated on where we're at before that happens.
You should be able to scroll, I think.
Oh, scroll.
Yeah,
not
sorry.
click. It's okay. Oops. So yeah, I just wanted to give you an update on what we've been doing since we last were here in May, as well as what the next steps are. And then if you have any questions or comments, happy to go through those with you. So I believe the last time we were here in May, we were kind of gearing up for a ton of outreach that we were going to be doing over the summer to gain public feedback on what people's priorities were and what they wanted us to focus on for the final recommendations for the plan. And so as you can see, we've been very busy. We've spoken to over 30 different people or had over 30 stakeholder meetings with municipal staff, local businesses, local organizations, regular residents. We've done 2 of our 3 surveys and gained, I think, a couple hundred on each of those surveys responses. Pop-up events, I believe I counted 9, and in the pictures, there's us at Bangor Pride, Bangor Green Drinks, and the Bangor Sidewalk Art Festival that was this summer. There's a ton of events that Bangor held either through the town or other organizations. That was really nice to get out in the public and actually speak to people face to face about what's going on, which I think was kind of an educational process as well as actually getting feedback on the process. We also continue to hold advisory committee meetings, and we formed and held 2 of our 3 working group meetings, which I'll get into a little bit more next. So here's kind of another overview of the project team. So the City of Bangor, Town of Orono, and Bax are on the project management team along with our 4 consultants. And then last time we had already formed and held meetings with our advisory committee, who's responsible for the overall project overview of like making sure that we're meeting our overall project goals and are speaking to the right people and, you know, getting the right source of feedback. But we also in the last few months formed something we were calling working groups, which is giving very specific types of feedback and input on those 5 different topic areas that we identified as being important in the region. So kind of in the process, the working groups are getting into the nitty gritty, passing it on to the advisory committee, who's making sure that it's aligning with, you know, the overall project goals. And then the project team and consultant team are working currently to make those final plans and recommendations. Yeah.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. So the town of Orono, what's their collaboration with the University of Maine in terms of the project management team? Is there any?
Yes, yeah. So I probably should have included a photo or like a photo of the
Sure.
UMaine logo because they Dan Dixon, who's their sustainability director, is on our project management team. They're just not funding
Perfect,
part
okay.
of this
Yeah.
project.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
But yeah, they've been a big part of our advisory committee and our working groups to bring that like expertise in the specific topic areas. So reviewing the schedule, we're still on track to have the final reports and deliverables prepared by the end of this year. And the beginning of next year, we'll be hosting some what we're calling implementation workshops, either with councils or municipal staff or, you know, any other sort of stakeholder group to make sure that we're setting everyone up for success and moving the plan from, you know, paper to action. Because we really want this plan to be quickly and easily implementable. So if there's any questions or any ways that we can support the councils or the town staff or whoever in supporting that, we want to do that. So yeah, we are moving along quite quickly. The final deliverables, just as a review, we still will have a summary report, which will include a number, I think there's 30 listed on here, different strategies that we'd recommend for this region. Not all of them will apply to Bangor. I think a lot of them will, but some might be ones that the city has already done and that we might recommend to the other towns to use Bangor as a case study. Others just might be things that specifically aren't relevant to the city, but I think, as I said, a lot of them will be. And then of those 30 plus strategies, 10 of them will get like the toolkit treatment, which will give very specific details on implementation. So if I go to the next slide, this is kind of a mock-up of what the toolkits might look like, not necessarily visually, but it will include, a general description of the action that we'd recommend, how that action supports different project goals, what sorts of background work has already been done to make sure that we're building off of that work. If there's any greenhouse gas emissions reductions or carbon sequestration that could be associated with that particular action, what key partners the city might want to work with, whether that's other towns in the region or other experts in those topic areas or other nonprofits who might already be doing that sort of work that the town can support or that we can work with to make sure that we're not duplicating efforts and that we're using our resources effectively. The toolkits will also give specific projects or policies or programs that could further that action. And the toolkit might also include, for example, draft language for an ordinance, if that's relevant. It could also include some general cost figures, either for cost of implementation or in some cases, cost savings. If you implement this project and it saves money in the long run, that would also, I think, be really important to consider when choosing, how to prioritize these different toolkits. So I'm going to kind of step back a little bit. So we have the 30 some strategies that are all important. Some of them will be low-hanging fruits, things that are really easy for the city to just do pretty quickly and easily. And then the toolkits are important and high impact, but they might not necessarily be the most important for the city. It kind of has been a little bit tricky as figuring out which strategies will be toolkits, because I think initially we're thinking, oh, these are going to be the most important, but it's really tricky to figure out what's the most important for all of the different people in the region. And so we ended up choosing ones that were, like I said, high impact, high priority, would need a little bit more digging into to make them really actionable. Some things, like I said, they're low hanging fruit. We already know who's going to do it, how much it's going to cost. We don't really need a lot of convincing, but some of them are a little bit more complicated, and we want to dedicate the toolkits to the ones that need a little bit more support. So next I have, there's 13 different strategies on here. Those are the 13 strategies that our working groups kind of narrowed down from the list of dozens and dozens of ones that we've considered that they thought was important. And we gave these 13 different strategies to our advisory committee, and they helped us narrow it down to that magic number 10 toolkit. I'm happy to go through any of these. I made them a little bit vague just for space on the slide. Happy to go through any of them or describe how we narrowed it down to 10 from these 13 if you're interested. Otherwise, you can be surprised once the final report comes out. I think overall, I'm pretty happy with how these turned out. I don't think many of them were super big surprises. I think they're kind of circulating a lot in the region already. And now we're just going to be really focusing on building that momentum around these. Yeah.
So I just want to know more so into the transportation side of things, like what sort of, obviously this is still going on, I completely understand that. What's some of the language or some of the priorities that the action plan is going to suggest that we do overall? Like, like how far, for example, do we go to the entire state and coordinate with them for larger projects like having a passenger rail system? Because I know it's very easy to advocate for expansion of sidewalks and expansion of a trail system, which are very, very important to the multimodal system of our cities and sister cities in the area. But I think it would be highly important to make sure that there is a need for that collaboration of multimodal systems, and to make sure that we're not necessarily bickering over languages when at the end of the day we have to make sure that we combat fossil fuel consumption. So I guess to answer your question is what sort of a transit and multimodal systems are we advocating in this action plan?
Yeah, so transportation was the working group that I facilitated, so it was really interesting to see how the progress of the different strategies and toolkits kind of developed throughout our different working groups, because we had a lot of different interests represented in the group. And I mean, we started out everyone agreeing that active transportation and transit were the priorities that they wanted to focus on in the region, which I don't think is surprising. But it was definitely tricky to figure out what actions or strategies would be quickly and easily implementable at like a local town level. I know like BACS as the transportation planning organization already does a lot of the planning work, and I think we've worked well regionally in making sure that transportation projects include all of those really important aspects. But what can we do, today or in the next year, whatever, to address those bigger issues like you're talking about? And I think collaboration is going to be a big thing, because even though I think we do pretty well locally or in this region, working together on these projects, when you're thinking about the expense of transportation types projects or transit service, it's definitely something that the state and the federal government need to be involved in. And I think there's a lot of effort and movement on that right now, but I think that gets into a little bit of my next slide.
Yeah, sure. And I guess I'll just end on this. As long as we're going forward with a clear agenda to not, for example, it's a very real issue in the state right now, which is the paving over of existing rail corridors, which there are some organizations that I won't name names, but they tend to be environmentally core groups that seemingly push their own agenda at the expense of mitigating a lot of the environmental pushes that other environmental organizations are trying to advocate for. So I would feel more comfortable knowing that our plan that we're joint in also involves in preserving a lot of those active corridors and non-active corridors that can be used in the future for potential passenger rail services. I think it's important for us as a city to reiterate that we're not going to be in favor of paving over rail corridors in the state. I think that's very important to make that very clear distinction.
Yeah, and I don't believe there's been a whole lot of conversation, honestly, about rail in this plan, just because it felt really big and not something that Bangor specifically could take action on, at least in implementing, next year or in the next few years. And so I think it was more focused on transit within Community Connector or, the other transit agencies.
Completely understandable. What I'm saying though is we make sure that we fight to preserve what we already have. Anyway, that's all I gotta say.
Does anyone want me to go through any of these specifically? Okay. And then I just wanted to very briefly kind of let you all know what the kind of emerging themes and questions that have come up through this process. I don't think they're new, but I've been interested to see how big communication has been brought up and as prioritized as important, not only within the city, talking to different departments, but town to town, or from the town to an organization like the Land Trust, or within the Land Trust. I think everyone knows communication is important, but that's been something that's been identified in every one of our conversations for every single strategy as being really important and impactful to making these happen effectively. Financial and staff capacity, we all know those are already issues to accomplishing pretty much any goal. And I don't think that's going to be different for any of the strategies that we've identified. Regional collaboration kind of goes into that financial and staff capacity. I think a lot of the strategies and toolkits that we're recommending would be benefited by a more regional scope. We're trying to make them something that's actionable for each town, but with limited capacity, perhaps we can look at pooling our resources and doing them collectively. Also, residents don't stop looking at services within their specific town. They will look for services wherever they can get them. And so I think making sure there's communication among all the different services and making sure that we're like I said, utilizing our resources effectively. I know like in transportation, BACS is a regional transportation planning agency. And so I think and hope that we're already doing that sort of work regionally, but there's a lot of other areas, in housing or health that could really use some more regional collaboration. I think that would really help. And then finally, something I've been thinking about a lot recently as we're winding down this project is how we can support this plan in its implementation going forward. So once this plan's done, making sure that within the city, there's momentum to keep thinking about this and keep pursuing it. Any ways that organizations like BACS can help with that, other key partners. I know that the people who are already participating in the project on our advisory committee or working groups are interested and passionate in staying involved. And so I'm just starting to think about what ways and what support we can create for this effort, either at a municipal level or outside of that. And I know we all have so many committees, but that's something I'm starting to think of. So if you all have any ideas or suggestions, happy to hear those.
I think it'd be great if BACS had a committee.
Yeah, yes.
Like a regional implementation committee.
Yes. Yes, well, we do have some funding set aside in the next few years to help
Oh.
with this.
Fantastic.
But of course, I think, yeah, I'm interested to see what the advisory committee folks and working group folks, I think they would be a really good group.
Yeah, keep
to
them
work on this.
engaged and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool, but yeah, and so the next steps, like I said, we have one more working group, we have one more survey, we have more advisory committees coming up. We'll be continuing to refine these strategies and toolkits in the next few months to prepare for the, final plan, which we'll release at the end of the year. And then, like I said, implementation workshops beginning of next year. Any questions? And there's a QR code to the website if you're interested.
I know this primarily is a Bangor, Orono focus, but are you getting any participation from other communities in this process?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think businesses and residents, there hasn't been any sort of discrimination or lack of contribution from the other towns, but in those like stakeholder meetings, we've met with all the towns in the region and spoken to them about what they would want from this plan, how we can make the strategies fit them. And a lot of the folks on the advisory committee and working groups live in those other towns. And so they're also constantly thinking like, well, this might work for Bangor, but it would have worked for Milford, or, what could we do to make this relevant to us? And so I think that's been a real benefit of having, all those different groups with a bunch of different types of stakeholders.
I think we went into it knowing too that some of the smaller towns would be reluctant for a variety of reasons to join in this planning process, but we wanted to create not only a plan for us that we could implement, but also that they could pick up later and at any point really and run with it. Because sometimes all it takes is a pretty involved citizen within one of those smaller communities to get something moving. And so this to provide a toolkit where, the plan is already there, hopefully makes a difference regionally over time.
Yeah, I think we also tried not to have like a ranked list of priorities because what's at Bangor's top priority is probably something that the smaller towns wouldn't want to touch. And so maybe low hanging fruit for Bangor is the first step for another town. And we've attended all of the councils for the towns in the region and are almost all of them. And they all seem very interested and engaged to see what comes out of the process.
Council Sprague?
A couple of points. Maddie, I think you and others have done an enormous amount of work. It's good work to move this forward. So thanks for all that. I was a not terribly involved member of the advisory committee, so I'll just bring it up that the council needs to replace me on the advisory committee, since I won't be on the council anymore after the election. So that's a outstanding issue. The point that Council Temple was bringing up, to which you responded, I think part of the discussion was that at some point it's going to come down to issues of, are these other communities willing to invest in implementation of the plan? And the idea that many of the smaller communities may not be at the point where they're really willing to invest in implementing some of those things. And I think that's going to be an outstanding issue. So the idea of, what the implementation plan is going to be really is going to require some real careful thought, which I know you're going to do, but really careful discussion with councils, particularly this one. And when I think about this, I also think that there are a lot of things that are coming out of this that at some point need to be integrated in with our existing efforts, with the city's existing efforts. So where we go with integrating these findings into our comprehensive plan. There may be changes to the comprehensive plan that are warranted because of these findings. Or any plan for addressing housing or any plan for addressing homelessness or the city's budgeting process. So that the connectivity between the work that's done and how it is going to be applied to the city government operations or to the other individual committees, I think is where the rubber's going to meet the road. And because there are going to be some very positive recommendations that are coming out of this. And when you refer to regional collaboration, several of those areas where there are work groups are all areas where the city needs regional collaboration in order to address some of our issues. We need regional collaboration on housing. We need regional collaboration on homelessness. So we need regional collaboration on transportation. So those work groups are talking about things that Bangor needs help with. And I think it's really critical to keep communicating with the council and with various committees. And that would be maybe a challenge as we get into the next council year with new councilors and new committee chairs in many cases and composition to make sure that the right groups know about the study. And Courtney, I'm sure, will help make sure that happens. But we don't want to lose in transition. We don't want to lose the necessary connectedness. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think a benefit of having so many city staff on this plan, at least I think, is not only that it will make it relevant for the city, but also I think we've got somebody from most departments in the city, not all, but who have been involved in this process throughout. Anya has done a ton of work on this process, and I know she's keeping in mind what can change in the comprehensive plan or what needs to be adapted. We have tons of city staff, and so I'm thinking and hoping that will help with implementation and making sure that a lot of people know about it.
So we kind of keep that in front of our mind, because that's going to be one of the real opportunities. I wouldn't even say challenges, but one of the real opportunities is to make sure that we connect all the good work that's being done. Thanks again.
Just to buttress Councillor Tremple's point on municipal collaboration, on Councillor Sprague's regional collaboration. And maybe you've already touched upon this before, and my apologies if I'm just forgetting. There's a lot of conversations happening at this table. What's our communication been with any of the county commissioners in regards to this plan? I feel like having more of a robust relationship with them might actually help us create those municipal connections on this plan as well. So if there isn't any to some, my only thing I'd like to see is just further collaboration and the communication with them, even if it has to be done from a council to commissioner relationship. I'm sure one of us is going to be more than willing to do that, but it would also be helpful to work together in terms of having a council liaison to the commissioners as well as to the action plan committee. I'll let you.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And honestly, we haven't really worked with or spoken with the county commissioner. We've spoken to different staff, I think, within the county or the county's departments, but no one, directly. So I definitely think that would be a really important avenue for making it regional. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so any other questions? That's a great update. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If you ever need more pens or stickers, let me know.
All right. All right. Marijuana licensing fee.
Yes, I believe City Solicitor Dave Stepchek is going to join us, and maybe even Mary Flynn, his legal assistant.
Yeah.
That's what a party.
Most of us, I don't think have met Mary before. I haven't.
Hi.
Welcome, Mary.
Yeah, this is Mary Flynn, the legal assistant in the legal department. And I brought her because she did the deep dive into the study of the not only what other cities are charging and the various fees they're charging with respect to the marijuana licensing, but also the deep dive into calculating the costs that we incur, or estimating the costs that we have with respect to that licensing. Last summer, there were some changes done to the cannabis licensing ordinances. And in the process of that, it was asked that we look into whether we should raise the fees that are associated with the licensing here. And it's been a long time, and the reason why is because we went down a rabbit hole on exploring those issues. And the handout that we're going to give you is very simple. It was in the agenda, but the study was in depth, and Mary did a lot of that. The bottom line is that licensing fees have to be tied to costs legally. And so we looked at what the 5 largest cities in Maine charge and what types of fees they're charging. And we also looked at what are our costs associated with the licensing of the medical marijuana and retail cannabis, and sort of did an audit of the staff's time to process the applications and perform inspections, payroll and benefit changes, and anticipated health insurance cost increases, looking into the amount of time that is put into each application. And I'm going to let Mary tell you some of the details of what she did in that process.
So what we started with was the current code of ordinances for both retail and medical marijuana. We then identified each department and position that was responsible for performing each step in the licensing process. We then met with each department and identified the amount of time that it took to perform each step. From there, we allocated actual average payroll cost and benefit burdens, and then added administrative fees such as postage and mileage, and came up with an actual dollar amount by category for licensing fees.
And the estimated, the recommendation that we're going to make, and this is the only thing I'm going to hand out. If you have questions for Mary about the process, that's why she's here. You'll see that the recommended raising of the fees is not pronounced, and it doesn't bring us up to where some of the other cities are in terms of what they charge. There's one significant increase, and that is charging for registered dispensaries. Our ordinance provides for those. We have those, but we don't charge a fee for them. And we're recommending that a fee be charged, and the amount is calculated based on the same estimates that the other fees are estimated. I would also say that cannabis stores, retail cannabis stores, they have to go through, in order to get a business permit, they have to go through the planning department and pay those fees. So those would be in addition to these fees. But the estimation also kind of takes into account what may be increases in what are the average costs right now, so that would, to a degree, take into account future increases that are likely to occur.
Okay, Council Point.
I know we asked this a while ago, so, and it sounds like you did a lot of due diligence on this whole thing, so this, to me, looks very appropriate.
I would agree
you're
with
asking.
Council Point. I mean, this is very comprehensive, obviously. I was hoping we may be able to increase them a little more, but this is reasonable. I mean, we can only charge what we can charge, so seems appropriate. Any questions on this, or is there a motion to approve the recommended fees?
Yeah.
That first and a second, okay. Without any objection, this will go on to council. Okay, thank you. And you're staying for the next. item.
We'll have an order prepared because this is just a change in the schedule of fees. It's not an ordinance change. So
Yeah.
that can just be done with an order that we'll prepare for one reading.
Sure.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, man. Nice to meet you. Are you doing the next item, Dave?
I'm staying for the next
Okay.
item and we're gonna talk about it together.
Yeah. So at the last meeting, we had chatted through a draft, or an idea, if you will, for a draft policy related to use of certain city property, whether that's a request for a flag or Pierce Park, things of that nature. And what we took away from that meeting was, kind of twofold. First, we had discussed the distinction between, government use and public use, essentially, because we don't want to infringe upon freedom of speech, but at the same time, there's other clauses that Dave can get into if you'd like to, around the government use speech. So what we did was we drafted a policy based on that discussion where folks can request use of Pierce Park for displays related to whatever it is that they want to display. It can be regulated based off of the message, if you will, just the time, place, and manner. And then everything else is limited to government speech. And then we laid out kind of a process for how that would work for all of those items. This is worth noting that the event permit policy is separate from this. I think it complements it. An event is kind of defined like if you're having a gathering of more than a certain number of people, that's deemed an event, and that has its own policy. But they will talk to each other if that's necessary. So did I miss anything? Dave, would you like to add anything?
No, just that, we were careful because this is kind of a somewhat of a catch-all policy. It applies to a number of different things. We are careful to make sure that it's clear in the written policy that this is either government speech or this is public forum. I've mentioned the last time that where cities have gotten in trouble in the cases is where they kind of get that mixed up. And we want to make sure that everybody's understands that in this area here, it's a public forum. That would be the use of designated area Pierce Park. And the other areas, we're keeping it as government speech in the policy to make sure that everybody knows it's not a public forum. It's the city talking.
Questions, or we did discuss this quite a bit earlier, Council Pelletier?
Just to say, I had an opportunity to review the policy and it seemed to me to conform with our previous discussion, so I don't appreciate the work that went into clarifying this.
Motion to approve this, to be moved forward.
So moved.
Second.
Second, this is going to the council as well?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Without objection, this as approved. Thank you very much for all the work.
Thank you so much.
Ada, back to the beginning of the Zoom. Homelessness plan. Council Sprague, we need to introduce anything? Or just-
No, I think this is a follow-up to a past discussion. And I think staff has taken a look at what was suggested and provided some very helpful additional comments. I think part of what it points out is that many of these items deserve a lot more discussion. They're conversations in and of themselves. I think what I had hoped when I proposed this is that we would at some point get to the point where we would say, yes, this is what the council is going to use as its guide for 12 to 18 months, something that is adequately flexible to adjust based on changes in circumstances. But that it would be kind of a legacy product carried over from this council to the next, to be hopefully point the way to what a plan should be to address homelessness. I would stress that as you go through this, most of the items are work in progress. This is not all about having a new agenda and, new things that we haven't already talked about. Put together from a variety of fragments from multiple council discussions and committee meetings, and 21 organizations or 21, 22 that came in and talked to government ops over a period of time and made their recommendations and presented what they were doing. And so I would, unless there are some real problems with some of these items, I'd like to see it passed on to the next council for further discussion and processing. There are just a couple of items which I would comment on specifically, and then I'll have to hear more comments. I think one of the things we've talked about, and we've had a discussion just recently about making sure that we invested the resources that we had approved in adding additional staff and having somebody to work on homelessness issues. I think we refer to as the homelessness specialist. And part of what I see that person's responsibilities being is to manage this package of activities, is to have the staff depth to provide the ongoing oversight of a package of activities aimed at homelessness. This has to be worked out operationally with the city manager. But I think that that's what I heard was some of our intent is to have additional capacity to keep the issues in focus, to keep an agenda and to manage that agenda on an ongoing basis. So that's one piece. This needs additional staff support in order to be able to carry forward with all these items. When I first ran for city council 3 years ago, we had a PCHC forum on homelessness, and councilors were, anybody candidates for, and we talked about homelessness. And at that point, what I said my thoughts was that we did not have any type of integrated community-wide plan to address homelessness. We had multiple organizations who sometimes collaborate, it's clear, but that were largely doing and completing and carrying out their own agendas with their own boards. They had their own imperatives, organizational imperatives, their own financial imperatives, but we did not have a strong integrated community response to homelessness. 3 years later, I believe that's still the case. And I believe that it's a missed opportunity for the council to provide adequate leadership to bring these organizations together, to have more constructive discussions about what a community approach is to homelessness. Some of them came together around some issues related to the encampments, but that's not a community-wide response. At one point, we were told the Community Health Leadership Board was going to take the lead and develop that integrated community plan. That didn't happen. So there is no approach on the table to do this. And I think that's one of the tasks, jobs, responsibilities that an additional homelessness specialist could take on, would be the facilitator of bringing groups together to do that. I think we could use ARPA funds to pay for that process. We've already set aside funds to pay for the person. But I think we are, as a community, really behind the curve in developing more of a community-wide approach. I'd also point out that some of these items that are on here have not been fully accepted by the council. And they need discussion. Just because, I wrote them down as a summary doesn't mean that everybody agrees to them. And I think that it's there are points that, are not work in progress, things that need to be more thoroughly discussed. I would point to one item where I had suggested in multiple meetings that we adopt a goal that every child in Bangor be adequately sheltered and nourished and have timely access to appropriate mental health services and substance use related services, and that we do that in conjunction with the Bangor School Department. That hasn't gotten very much attention. I think we are working with the school department on some housing issues. That's just clear. but I believe the community would be much better served if the council and the school board jointly made a very strong statement about their mutual commitment of the city and the school board to accomplishing these things as part of the addressing homelessness. That would drive other decision making. It would drive the school budget, it would drive the council budget, it would drive our mutual conversations. And I don't understand why it is so difficult to do that. So there are some things here, and the one item that I believe is now missing from this is discussions we've had just in the past few weeks. We started some of those discussions at the same government operations committee that I introduced this. This was about what we're really going to do with people who are not really willing to accept the support services the city has to offer, who may be homeless, who are in encampments, and how we're going to handle that. And we've had discussions about doing some of that with a firmer hand, which might be characterized as a tough love approach, with compassion but firmness in terms of some of the issues about trespassing on city properties and some of the issues related with dealing with people who are in the encampments but won't accept any help in getting out of that situation. I think that probably should be added to the list. And I think as this is being further discussed, we really haven't stated it as something we would like to seek any more public input on. I know there are a lot of people who are, extremely concerned about the issues related to the homeless. I would like to see more people review what has been suggested in this approach, and for the council to have some additional public comment. But I think it should lead ultimately to having something that is a 12 to 18 month guide to action that can be updated perhaps quarterly, that can be used as a tool when we go through our budgeting process, or when you go through the budgeting process, I should say. I believe we would be much better served by getting our thoughts and our expectations and our intentions down on paper, with this as a draft, in a form that could be used on an ongoing basis by the council and with the community.
Council Leonard.
This is the proactive approach that I very much like to see that's happening. It's of course not perfect. It has very much a single-minded approach from Councilor Sprague, but I want to very much put reiterate this point that we need to start somewhere. And I really see this as a living, breathing document that we can figure out what are some approaches that are that have a majority support of council on for what are our goals and objectives, figure out what those are, list them. And then once those are created, what are the steps and approaches, those underlying goals with those larger overarching goals? How do we achieve, for example, making Bangor a city that has eradicated childhood poverty and childhood homelessness? Because that's not something that we can do overnight, but there are steps that we can do to get closer to that goal. And that's something that that we can do, but we have to clearly define that that is a goal that we as a city want to adopt. And it's an ambitious goal, but it's a goal that I think we do have to lead this region in, because we are the service center. We are the ones that help out the struggling municipalities all around the state. There are certain clinics out there that just have 2 blood bags in their clinics, that not for each type, just 2. They're falling. That a lot of people don't realize these smaller towns and their clinics, just how close they are on the brink of collapse. And it's because we are very strained and very stressed at this time, and more so than ever, these surrounding municipalities rely on Bangor's not only resources and services, but also in the way that we respond to these larger scale problems. And so this is a very much needed first step into these proactive goals that not only help staff respond to the best ways to address these problems, but also to showcase to the city what your leadership is doing and how we're going to address this and how we're going to give you updates each time that there is something to update you with, whether it is good news or bad news. And so again, I just wanted to thank Councilor Sprague for coming forward with this draft. And I know there will be some well, I'll just end there if anyone else wants anything to add, but I, in general, am very supportive of this document. Thank you.
I would say this is, I agree, this is a good document to start with. I mean, it obviously, I think it's a single issue we hear the most about in week in and week out. And I just want to make sure that when we get this plan forward, it integrates with the work of PCHC and CHCS and HEAL and all the groups that are working on these issues. And it just would be remiss if I didn't point out a glaring error in this report, Councilor Sprague. Your Roman numerals are off. You go from 14.
What did I tell you from earlier on? What
To
did I tell you?
11, and then you get back on track. Yeah, you know, it's a glaring, I just want to.
I apologize for that, and I seek the council's forgiveness.
Councilor Pelletier.
Thank you. The place that I agree with Councilor Sprague the most on this is that we need somebody in place full-time to manage this. I expressed in our last meeting my concern that we have not posted or filled the homelessness position that we have allocated funds for, and would like to see that become a priority, to have somebody in that role, ideally by the end of the year, because we have a lot of work to do.
So we will, is it plan, Courtney, we would keep this on the next year's government operations committee to see what they want.
So I think this becomes part of sort of the introduction and the discussions as you start a new council year.
Mhm.
And it's a good jumping off point into Councilor Sprague's point. Especially, and many of us staff live and breathe in a lot of these things. So I think it's important that Councilor Sprague points out that a new councilor coming in has very little to go by. You're kind of going by this, it's hard to get caught up on the conversations that may have happened prior to your arrival. So I think it's a great starting point that hopefully we can, to Councilor Leonard's point, is new council does priorities and goals, is it's a great starting off point to pick off those one or two things that we really want to put most of our efforts behind.
Okay, does that sound like a good?
I would agree with Councilor Pelletier. I would mostly agree with City Manager Warwick. I would say that this is not something that you look at and say, let's just pick off one or two things off this list. Like, this is a package of activities that needs to be managed all at the same time. There's nothing here that I would say we could take off and say, let's just not do that for the next 2 years. Like, this is in our face, and we need to be acting in a fully responsible way and stating to the community what we intend to do with transparency. And say, and at some point, I think the council ought to adopt something like this, if not exactly the same, and say, yes, this is our community statement of our intentions and where we are going to be putting our effort in the next 12 to 18 months. And then 3 months later, update it in a similar way that staff has provided comments, and keep it an ongoing working document. But it's at some point, it should be a little more official in terms of the council's position.
And you have the next statement as well.
And going to that, the first item on when we last had our operations committee meeting, we said, let's put together, at least I think we said, I know I said, I think we said, that we should have a list of outstanding items just to hand off from the Government Operations Committee for this year's council year to the next. Council Trumbull probably won't be the chair of that committee next year. And there will be different counselors, they will have a different makeup. And in the interest of just saying, okay, let's not lose things from the agenda, it was suggested that we just write down the things that were currently in the works or items that we had indicated sometime over the last year needed for discussion, some of which may have been deferred for good reason, and some of which may simply slip through the cracks. And without some written ongoing summary to use, it's very easy to kind of lose your place. So it was my interest in this committee and also in Business and Economic Development to have that guide to keep us on track so we don't lose our place. And I don't envision going through this all in detail tonight, but I believe it serves as a useful tool in the upcoming council year to work through this document and have discussions with the council, with the committee about, yes, what is it we are really working on to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And that we are being clear with the community openly to say, this is what's under discussion. So that the community can say, gee, this is really good, or you're really missing some points. And here's some things that we think you ought to be considering. I think that most of this is pretty straightforward, although we haven't had any discussion since this was sent out. Certainly be interested in reactions to some of this. There are a number of items here for which there is yet really to be a staff response on some of them. And I think those become some of the other discussion items. So I guess I would stop at that point and entertain any questions about what I said here or what I thought the intention was, and I'd be interested in more of your reaction.
To clear, anybody have questions on any of the items in there? Yeah, I'll do that.
I mean, I guess I can say something. I still need more time to review this document. I only did an initial reading of it, so I still need to come back and make some points. But this just to reiterate what we have said over the last few weeks now is to set up our committee chairs for success. There has to be some sort of document handoff to help not only those committee chairs, but the committee to be successful for the next year. If they don't have a understanding of where that committee was in the years past and where they are at present, it's going to be much harder for them to be proactive with the upcoming year. So again, I'm just going to say that a document like this is going to be very helpful for all committees in the future. And I know this is kind of getting at stuff that we already said previously, so I won't reiterate the point too much, but this handoff document is going to be, in my opinion, it should be a precedent thing for committee chairs to receive and then give to the incoming committee chairs.
I'd add the comment that I think that it's important that the committees and the council is held fully accountable for making progress on certain issues. And it's very hard to do that if they're not written down. And if they're not used on a regular basis. So this is a tracking mechanism. And I think it's for the counselors and staff to hold each other accountable. But also for the community to say, in your work plan, you said you were going to discuss such and such. or you are going to consider a particular issue. And if it's not there, it's not written down as part of the work plan, if it's not disclosed to the public, then it's very easy, as I said earlier, to lose one's place.
Anything else on this? No? Well, thanks for this work. I agree, this is good to have. Anything else tonight? All right, we are adjourned then. Thank you very much.